Hello, folks. I am here at Ski Stua in Trondheim on this absolutely gorgeous September day. Just take a look at this. This is not what we normally have in autumn in Trondheim. This week, I am very much being a tourist in my own city because a friend of mine from jolly old England has come to visit. That's Sean over there, just taking in the scenery. And I am showing him what to see and do in the Trondheim area. So this video is about our week in Trondheim. I hope you enjoy.
Now, Sean had made it clear to me that while he did want to see the highlights, he also wanted to see the real Trondheim and see what everyday life was like for us. So I took that as a challenge. And in sharing Trondheim with our visitor, I discovered things I had forgotten I loved about my adopted home city. I had been a bit worried Sean might miss his short connection in Oslo, but his happy face soon appeared in the arrivals hall at Trondheim Airport. And we then made our way into Trondheim to our usual watering hole, the Trondheim microbrewery for beers and pizza. The next morning was set to be a whistle-stop tour of the Trondheim highlights. We may as well get them out of the way straight away. Now, it did start, unfortunately, a bit slowly because we were waiting for the bus for what seemed like an eternity. But eventually one did show up and we made our way to, of course, Nidaros Cathedral, the obvious starting point for any trip to Trondheim. The beautifully decorated west front always makes a striking first impression, so we started simply by admiring the sculptures before making our way inside. You do have to pay to enter the cathedral as a tourist, and it's worth getting your tickets online in advance to skip the queue and walk straight in. Now, even after 12 years of living in Trondheim, I'm still a little awestruck when I walk into the cathedral. The intricate detail on every wall and the sheer height of this place, you just can't believe it's the same building you were looking at from outside just moments before. These details on the rose window, beautifully framed by the organ pipes, really catch the eye when the light strikes just right. I walked Sean around the interior and showed him my favourite sculptures, including these lovely specimens at the base of the font. After escaping a noisy school group and locating the stairs, which I always seem to struggle to find, we made our way down to somewhere I always love to show visitors, the exhibition of gravestones found during renovations over the years. We had a combined ticket for the cathedral and museums, so it was time to head over to the two museums, starting with the Royal Regalia. Like many visitors to Trondheim, Sean was surprised that the crown jewels were on public display, with so few people there. Unfortunately, it's one of the few places in Trondheim where I'm not allowed to film, so let's take a look instead inside the Archbishop's Palace Museum. Over the centuries, Nidaros Cathedral and the Archbishop's Palace have gone through several rounds of expansions and renovations. A lot of what was discovered wasn't thrown away, it was preserved in this fascinating museum. My favourite part is the former mint, which thanks to good explanations and photos on the wall, you get a real sense of the centuries of history and the many, many stories held here. After a walk around the back of the cathedral, we continued on to the Old Town Bridge to take in this well-known landmark and this famous view of Trondheim, looking its absolute best in the September sunshine. Heading back downtown, we passed through the Park of the Royal Residence. With some of the highlights done, it was time to focus on everyday life, as Sean wanted, starting with the hockey. Pre-game, we headed to Lag Elve, a food hall in an industrial part of Trondheim that's one of our regular local haunts. Given that Sean had taken us to a food hall last time we visited him in Yorkshire, it only seemed fair to return the favour. A mix of Indian and Mexican food, followed by a couple of beers, and then a couple more, and we were ready for the game. Now, Sean hadn't been to a hockey game before and had no idea what to expect, just like me a couple years ago. But he thoroughly enjoyed the spectacle, even though home team Nidaros lost out in the end. Heading into nature is perhaps the most Norwegian thing it's possible to do, and so that's exactly what we did the next day. We began in the morning by walking along the Nidelva River near our apartment. It was another lovely morning and a great way to introduce Sean to our neighbourhood. Now on the way back, we stocked up on supplies for the afternoon in our local supermarket, where Sean, of course, tried finding his name on the Coke bottles. He didn't succeed, but he did find Odd and Seaman amongst others. With supplies bought, we caught the bus up to Bymarka, Trondheim's city forest, where many hiking trails start. At Skistua, we began by walking around the small lake where this video began.
If you want to know more about Trondheim, please do check out lifeinnorway.net, where you'll find loads of articles, photos and videos about my adopted home city. And if you do enjoy these videos, please consider supporting me and the channel on Patreon. Backers get early access to videos like this, plus exclusive travel tips from yours truly, a travel writer who's lived in Norway for 14 years now.
After circling the lake, we decided to follow the trail up to Gråkallen, well known for being the top of Trondheim. This green radar dome is a landmark that can be seen across much of the city, and when you reach it, well, the views make the short but steep trek well worth it, especially on a day like this. After enjoying the view for a while, we returned to the city the same way and rewarded ourselves with a local beer at Work, before enjoying a gorgeous sunset from our apartment balcony. The next day, it was time for a dose of culture. We took the bus into the city centre, and after a quick walk through some new-to-Sean streets, we arrived at Pomo, Trondheim's new museum of modern art. The museum has made quite a splash on the European art scene since its opening, not least because of the fabulous work the team has done converting this former post office building. But we were there to see a Picasso exhibition, which had just a few weeks left to run. After an hour or so at the gallery, we enjoyed lunch with some friends, who then walked us around their neighbourhood, which included another part of the river, some of the city's bridges, and a visit to the Commonwealth War Graves at Stavner Graveyard. That's somewhere I had not been for many years. On our walk back to their place, we passed through St. Olav's Hospital and saw one of the emergency helicopters taking off. Now that's not exactly rare, but it's certainly not something we see every day, and especially not from our apartment south of the city. Now, Sean is a gamer, so a trip to Outland was a must. Outland is Norway's main shop for gamers, fantasy and sci-fi geeks, and we spent a while there browsing before heading home for a game of junk art. Despite my very best efforts in putting him off, Sean proved pretty talented at this game. Now, late September is the beginning of Northern Lights season in Norway. Now, despite the fact we don't see them very often in Trondheim, I had been keeping an eye on the Northern Lights forecast, just in case. And well, this evening my phone buzzed with an alert. We went outside, and look what we saw. The Northern Lights were clearly visible from our apartment balcony, and just half an hour later, the show turned into something truly special indeed. I was so pleased Sean got to experience this. It was one of the best Northern Lights displays I've ever seen from Trondheim. Now, while there is a lot to see and do in Trondheim, I wanted Sean to see more of what central Norway as a whole has to offer. So, the following morning, we headed down to Trondheim Central Station to board a train to Roros, one of my favourite places to visit from Trondheim. The train was practically deserted as we boarded, and it stayed that way for almost the entire journey to Roros. The journey, which follows the river for much of the way, was absolutely gorgeous, and the 2.5-hour trip just flew by. I'd given Sean the heads up about Roros, but I deliberately held back just how picturesque it was to surprise him. This former copper mining town is today a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and despite very much being a lived-in town, much of the historic feel of Roros is still very much intact. We paid a quick visit to the Mine Museum to learn a bit more about the context, but we spent most of our 4-hour visit simply walking the streets and topping the slag heaps to get these fantastic views of the town and its surroundings. I also made sure we left time to explore some of the modern industry that makes Roros famous within Norway, including the pottery and the Roros Tweed Factory outlet, where I may have finally indulged in a blanket after years of wanting one. With that, this quick trip to Roros was over. Back in Trondheim, Sean tried his first Norwegian sausage, the pølse, from the Narvesen at the train station, and he seemed to enjoy it. The trip wasn't over yet though, and for Sean's final day, we decided to head back into nature. Given the lovely weather, again, we took a walk along Ladestien, a well-known trail that edges the Lada Peninsula to the northeast of central Trondheim. There's some interesting sights along the way and some great spots for photos, including Korsvika Beach. By the time we reached Ladakea restaurants, we were ready for a well-deserved beer and some local food, including an epic shrimp sandwich. That night, Sean was treated to one last glimpse of the tricky lady before it was time for him to pack. Now, in the morning, there was still time for him to sample a chili from Trondheim Institution Dromedar to complete his Trondheim like a local experience. And with that, it was time to say goodbye. But Sean enjoyed himself so much, he's already said he'll be back. Now, I actually recommended Sean come back in the winter when Trondheim and all of Norway really has a totally different vibe. But if you're planning to visit Norway in the winter, you need to be prepared. Check out this video next for my top tips on winter travel in Norway. And as always, thank you for watching.